Hi, I'm LEE LEHMAN. About 30 years ago, I became interested in medical astrology. And I became interested because my academic training is in biology. It was actually specifically in botany, which mostly in the United States where I'm from no longer exists as a scientific discipline. But my interest was simply at the beginning because it was an intellectual curiosity. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is one of potentially the most useful ways we can use our astrology. And because I had the biological background, this was easier for me to work with than I think a lot of other astrologers. My feeling about the necessity for this within our field of astrology only grew over time. And it grew because I watched what it did for myself and for my clients. For myself, like everybody else, I've got a family. And it doesn't matter whether your family is a multi-generational family of 20 or 25 or maybe even more, or whether your family is one person and 3 cats. Either way, these are issues that you will face. We are all mortal creatures with everything that means. And at times we get sick, at times we get more than sick. And so do our friends, and so do our pets, and so do our families, and so do our clients. And being able to help people with this area, which is an area where there's a tremendous amount of anxiety in people. You know, and I probably don't have to talk to you much about that anxiety because you've experienced it. Just this week, I was dealing with the wife of a man who had a heart attack. And this is in the United States, where most of my practice still is. He had been coming from overseas. He got off the plane. He was in baggage claim. And he said to his wife, "I don't feel very well." And fortunately, there were people around who could deal with that. They had a defibrillator, which he needed. He got to the hospital quickly because they were there. And then they took him to the hospital. They gave him a couple of stents and they released him. And then a few days later, he had another episode. Nobody told him about the second episode. Now, it's things like that. On the one hand, you look at this from a purely medical standpoint. And what happened was a success because there were people around who could give him the emergency care and get him to the hospital. But on the other hand, he didn't know when that second event happened that this was actually something that was rather common. There are things that people get anxious about. His wife was more anxious when I talked to her after the second event than after the first. And actually the first was far more dangerous. So these are situations that people are facing. And where as an astrologer, I can work with them is to talk to them about what the magnitude of this is now. It is, you know, and this is not to say, oh, don't go to the hospital because you're not going to die. That would be ridiculous. But it's about saying to them how this fits in context to what they're dealing with. And can I, because of what astrology does, which is tell you about the flow of time, whether it's the flow of time in general for the world, which we call mundane astrology, or whether it's the flow of time around and through an individual. And sometimes the best thing you can do in medical astrology is to talk to people about time, that the charts are showing that right now is the peak point of what you're experiencing, or the peak point is in, say, the next 6 months, or the peak point is past. And it's also being able to see that, hey, it looks like in 2 years, things may get difficult for you health-wise. And it might be a really good idea for you to clean up your diet now. So there's practical advanced information. There's taking it within the context of where things are at right now. There's anticipating the future. And this is our job as astrologers because we are the ones who study time. Now, the thing is, it's also like what happens if you're interested in, I'm going to say medical here in a general sense, as a profession. If you want to become a medical doctor, a physician, using the old term, you have years of study to learn. And no matter how you feel on the scale of conventional to alternative medicine, we would all agree that that kind of training takes time. You need to learn anatomy. You need to know what the muscles are. You need to know how they hook in with the blood vessels, with the nerves, with all the functioning pieces of the body, and then you need to know how to recognize disease. In a sense, an astrologer does a mini version of that. But also think, if you're an acupuncturist, you need to learn the meridians. If you're a massage therapist, you need to learn the muscles and the bones to understand how you can do your profession the best. Now, we need to learn about the sun, the moon, and the stars. But we also have to project those right onto the body so we can understand how the two systems work together. Medical astrology is more than 2,000 years old. I would argue that through the history of astrology, the use of astrology in medicine has been one of the primary applications which has kept astrology going through different cultures, through different religions, through different languages, because it's such a practical tool. Now, how do you learn medical astrology? The answer is you do not take a weekend course. Like anything that you study that seriously, it takes time. What we are proposing to do here at Astro College Virtual is to take you through those different layers. We'll start with some of the preliminary materials, such as parts of the body and how they're shown astrologically, general theories of disease that are actually at this point more than 1,000 years old. Some ideas about how you can apply this in, for example, herbalism, or through the use of stones or the conventional healing modalities that have been part of our history, even back to, as we call it, the Stone Age, where with some of the mummies that have been found, there have been found evidence of either early acupuncture or early herbalism. So these are the things that we start with, and then we develop it. You will learn how to look at a chart from a medical standpoint. And there are a lot of stages to that. It probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now to just state them out, but you can look them up and see what we're covering. The way that we work this course is it's a lecture course. I will be giving it in English because that's all I can do here. Glenda will be giving the Spanish translations. You will get all the materials in Spanish so that you'll have the best experience for your purposes. And I'd like to show you right now a sample slide from one of the early presentations to just give you a feel for how this material works. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how this works. Basically, the body is thought to be in balance. We can talk about this, and we'll talk about it now just from the standpoint of the more common astrological ideas of things like the sun and Leo. Like Chinese medicine, traditional Hellenistic medicine took the body to say, if you have a disease, you can have a disease where it's either you've got too much or too little, too strong or too weak. And either one can represent a state of being out of balance. So there's a big emphasis on understanding what parts of the body are strong and what parts are weak, because it's through a strong part of the body that a disease can manifest to the point where you have symptoms strong enough to then be treated by the doctor. Okay, so if we're translating this idea of strong and weak into an astrological model, the way that we would generally look at this is, for example, through the ascendant. Now, the ascendant is considered of the body. It's the bodily description, for example. So let's say you have somebody who is a sun in Leo, where the sun is in the first house. We would all agree that's strong Leo. Okay, so you will see strong Leo in many ways, but one of the ways you can see strong Leo is medically. Okay, because the association with the sign Leo and with the sun is to the heart. So if you have someone who is a sun in Leo in the first house, you would expect them to have a strong heart. Well, what's a strong heart? I mean, does that mean that this person wins all the marathons they ever enter? Well, there's sun and Leos in the first house who've never entered a marathon. Imagine. Okay, but strong is not necessarily physically strong, because from the very beginning, the physicians who were studying disease realized that disease could be physical, it could be mental, it could be spiritual. Now let's take our sun and Leo in the first house person, and let's say they're in their early 20s. Okay, they go out to get a job. Are they suddenly the chief executive of the corporation? No, of course not. They're not old enough. But does that sun and Leo feel like it should be the head of the corporation? So there's a bit of a dissonance there between how they feel this should be and how it is. And we all have those kind of dissonances. It's like you get this configuration sun and Leo, and the person is working an entry-level job as an intern in the accounting department. Okay, this is not going to have the kind of Leo, I can make a difference, I can lead, I can do these things I want to do the way I want to do them. That job isn't going to give them any satisfaction. So now what happens? They get unbalanced, or they can. They don't always. Astrologically, you can probably pick out half a dozen ways they might become unbalanced already. So they start to become unbalanced. There starts to be a problem. And this now can manifest over time. And it's the over time that's so important with the heart. Because when people have problems with their heart, this is not just an overnight thing. Even if our most common manifestation of that in the form of a heart attack looks like it's coming out of nowhere, it's not. And Hippocrates was very clear on that. Now, as a medical astrologer, you can see astrological configurations that suggest, one, that the heart is a strong part of this person's body, which means now you have to be concerned about heart disease as possibly being in their future. And so now we have certain ideas about this in terms of how we would deal with this person in a broader sense than just the astrology of it. You can talk about exercising aerobically, cutting down on fats, changing your diet. And these are measures that are said to strengthen the heart. Okay, but the real heart includes, are you feeling satisfaction in your life? Do you feel that you are able to make the kind of a contribution to the world that you know you can? Are you in a situation where to be able to either be in the relationship you're in or the job that you're in, where you can manifest strength? Or are you always in a position where nobody asks your opinion, nobody listens to you, and you feel like you're an outcast? Because if you're the latter, now you may well have an imbalance of the heart. So my job as a medical astrologer is not to treat you in an intensive care unit. That's the job of an MD, and I am not an MD. But my job is to talk to you about the greater totality of your life and how heart issues are important if that's what your issue is, And how can we, using the ideas of astrology, help you to develop a lifestyle that will be healthy for you over time? So this should give you an idea of some of the kinds of issues we will be dealing with in this course. And in addition to the lecture portion, the kind of material you just saw, we'll also give you some sessions where you can practice these skills so that when you get out of the program, you feel confident that you can work with it. So I hope you join me to be part of this course.